back to the channel, and today a quick review for this. It is Roadside Picnic. This is by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. Now this is a Russian translated novel. It was originally written in 1971 and published in 1972, so it is a early new wave science fiction novel. Now it is a first contact novel of around 200 pages, or about kind of 58 to 60,000 words. It isn't the longest novel in the world. It only took me a couple of sittings to read, and that is because it is very, very easy to read. And that is mostly due to a new modern translation by Olena Barmashenko. Now, I'm really happy that I read this translation, having not read this novel before, and translations being so important. I found this one very, very easy to read. So this does come recommended if you are picking up the novel and you are a little bit worried about which translation you will get. I can actually recommend this one based on my reading experience. Now, I did read it very quickly, but it did affect me still. Now, it is a first contact novel, but it doesn't feel like a traditional first contact novel. The alien presence has already left Earth. This is very much dealing with the aftermath. Now, it feels almost post-apocalyptic in its atmosphere, and the way it is written, it can be quite bleak. Now, this is a highly influential book. It was actually adapted into the 1979 movie Stalker, and also was the inspiration for the 2007 series of video games in the Stalker universe. And it deals with zones. Those are basically the visitation sites, and they have been left ill affected by the visitation, and those zones are picked over by a kind of a group of people that are self-called stalkers, where they basically enter the zones, and it's extremely dangerous to enter the zones, and there are kind of alien artifacts, so to speak, or items that have been affected on Earth by that visitation. And that's where that concept of roadside picnic comes, almost like maybe the visitation wasn't quite as big for the alien species as it was for us humans, and it is really how humanity is affected by that visitation. And it is fair to say that that visitation, that human beings may be fairly apathetic towards it, which is quite a new spin on first contact. And I think a lot of that comes from the oppressive feeling of the government and kind of the military complex nature that is here. A lot of that is very understandable, how there's like an anti-Western consumerism there, but also a very anti-authoritarian from the Russian government. I think a lot of that comes from the time when this was written. This was obviously before the wall fell. This very much feels like it was written behind the Iron Curtain, and that gives it a real edge in reading experience, something a little bit different, a little bit of different texture to the way it reads, which I really, really, really appreciated. And it was something like just very Russian about the way that human beings in this maybe weren't necessarily, you know, this visitation doesn't necessarily rock their world. It doesn't necessarily change the way that they react. People seem to be able to go back to the base instincts of the species and really look after their family, their quality of life, attain money, maybe drown their sorrows. There is some existential crisis in this and some fear around what they're discovering, how dangerous it might be. But at the end of the day, it is a very pragmatic and practical response to what would be a first contact story. And it has a lot of themes in there that really deal with those issues. It's a deep book, but it doesn't really wear all its themes on its sleeve. There is something about the atmosphere of this book. It's very bleak. There's like a very dense feeling of apathy, and it's quite brutal and cold in its delivery. There's just something different about this book that makes me enjoy it, maybe a little bit more than the content would suggest. I'd actually give this a 4.6 out of 5.